In today's video, I'm going to share with you 10 helpful tips and tricks that you can use in your next DIY conduit project, no matter what you're building. Let's get into it. Maker pipe connectors have built-in features that make the building process simple, but today's tips and tricks are going to speed up your project even more. If you like seeing tips and tricks, hacks, build ideas, and other creative uses of ordinary materials, then definitely consider subscribing because that's what we're all about here on the channel. With that said, let's get into today's tips and tricks. The first tip I have for you is a really simple trick for marking your cuts. Conduit has a glossy surface, which means pens and pencils don't show up that great when trying to mark the pipe, so we usually recommend that you use a Sharpie. As you can see, a Sharpie almost works too well as it leaves a visible mark that's really hard to get off. Which means if you're like me and sometimes measure and mark the wrong spot, then you have a visible Sharpie mark that stays on the pipe even after your project is finished. Instead, you can use a dry erase marker to mark where you want to make your cut. This way, after you make your cut or mark the wrong spot, you can easily wipe it off. Sometimes you might cut your pipes a little too short or long. For example here, I wanted 4 30-inch legs. As you can see, this first pipe that I cut is a little bit short. Rather than trying to cut the other 3 legs to match whatever the exact measurement is, I'm just going to use the first cut piece of conduit as a guide to measure and mark the other 3 pieces of conduit. This way I know all 4 pipes are the same length and my legs will be even. Pretty much all blades get dull over time with use, and the cutting wheel on the pipe and tube cutter is no different. However, tradesmen have a really simple trick that extends the life of the cutting wheel. All you have to do is stop just before the cut is finished, and then you can snap the conduit in 2. This may only save a little bit with each cut, but it definitely adds up over time. Speaking of cutting conduit, this next trick is going to make that process even easier. We're going to attach a T-connector on the piece of conduit that we're cutting and use it as a handle that we can hold on to while spinning the conduit cutter around. I've got to shout out Jay from the community for not only sharing this trick, but also the next one, which helps with connector assembly. He uses a piece of electrical tape to hold the nuts on the back of the connectors while threading in the bolts. This is really clever and keeps your other hand free while getting the bolts started, which means you don't have to worry about dropping the nuts when assembling the connectors. The 5th trick allows you to line up your conduit and get an even connection from side to side. All you have to do is measure from the bottom of the leg and then add a mark with the dry erase marker where you want that connection to be. Then all you got to do is line up your connector with the mark on both sides and then add your conduit across. After you've lined it up and connected everything, you'll have a nice even connection. It's also a good idea to add a perpendicular line that signifies which side of the mark that you intend to place the connector. Without this mark, it's really easy to forget, and you may accidentally line up the connector differently on each side, which results in an uneven connection. When you're trying to connect multiple pipes, it can be difficult to juggle the connector pieces, the hardware, and the conduit all at one time. To make it easier on yourself, you can assemble the connectors loosely by hand first. When you're ready to make your connections, simply slide the connectors over the pipes. Once you have the connectors in the desired position, you can tighten the hardware just a little bit so they stay in place. Or you can use a cool trick where you mark where you want the connector to be and then use a clamp to hold it there while you make the connections. Every order comes with extra friction bands, and these can be used in 2 different ways. You can replace the pre-applied friction band that comes on the connectors, or you can use them to add extra grip to a pipe. All you have to do is use a heat gun to apply the friction band around the conduit and then make your connection like normal. The final trick is for those adding shrink wrap to their project. After you heat it up and shrink it onto the conduit, you may have extra sticking out. Instead of cutting this piece off, you can push it into the end of conduit while it's still warm, and this gives it a nice, clean, and finished look. If you want more helpful tips and tricks, then check out this playlist here. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.